Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. Travis Reier from BamaOnline.com, the senior analyst there, along as we are twice a week here on Talkin Tide, talking Alabama football. We're going to be recapping LSU's thrilling 32-31 win over Alabama, an overtime victory in Death Valley. First, though, we are going to tell you where you can get Talkin Tide. Certainly Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you prefer to get your podcast. You can also catch us on YouTube and Facebook. So certainly looking forward to interacting with listeners and viewers alike. The Twitter feed, of course, is Talkin_Tide. If you'd like to get links to the Twitter to the podcast, you can do that right through that Twitter feed. Again, Twitter, it's Talkin_Tide. Discombobulated here, Travis. I'm just coming off the road. Just got back from Baton Rouge about an hour and a half ago as we record this on Sunday evening around 9 p.m. Central. The fallback hour was not of much help to me. Certainly not as helpful as I was expecting it to be. So anyway, did finally make it back in one piece. Want to thank our sponsors really quickly. North River Dental Associates, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, and DraftKings. More on them later in the program. Right now, though, Travis, we take a look back at this back and forth battle where the Crimson Tide came up short, essentially out of SEC West contention now with their second loss of the season. LSU in the driver's seat, Ole Miss in the passenger seat, and Alabama pretty much in the back seat.
I think that pretty much sums it up, man. It sort of feels like old times for you and me, Goodbread. You know, our first year together on the beat back in 2007, the last time Alabama lost back-to-back road games happened in that season 15 years ago. And the loss in Baton Rouge on Saturday night, back-to-back road losses for the 2022 Alabama team. And so we talked about some of the first, I guess, for this team, and they're not exactly the kind that you would like, or the first since ...
Yeah, for sure. A lot to get into with this one. We'll start as we usually do, I guess, on the offensive side of the ball. Travis, I'll start with this. I don't think Bryce Young was right physically. I didn't see his normal velocity, and he certainly didn't have his normal accuracy. This was his first career game under 50% as a passer. And look, the guy's smart. He makes great decisions. He's very elusive. He extends passing plays probably better than any quarterback at the college level that I can name. I mean, he might be the best I've ever seen at buying time in the pocket, but he was off, and he admitted it after the game. There was one play, and look, you can speculate on the shoulder and whatnot. I do find it a little strange that he would look that way coming off a bye week where Nick Saban said he was finally able to practice again. Kind of would have expected to see the opposite, right? Maybe kind of a physical rebound from Bryce Young. As it turned out, his best game since injuring that shoulder against Arkansas was his first game back against Tennessee when he lit it up for 455. And then 3 weeks later, coming off a bye week, he turns in a performance where you wonder if he had it. And again, you know, I'm not speculating he got hurt on this, but there was one play early in the LSU game where he was trying to avoid a sack. He was running toward the sideline. It was very similar to the play where he got hurt on against Arkansas. And right at the end of the play, he just instinctively stretched that right arm out a little bit, and he kind of tucked it, I think, kind of too, right before he fell. It wasn't quite as pronounced as it was against Arkansas, but I saw that, and I turned to our beat writer, Nick Kelly. I said, he almost did that again.
Yeah. I recall the play, and I think it was Harold Perkins Jr., the true freshman outside linebacker, that was in pursuit on that play, similar to Drew Sanders for Arkansas on the play in Fayetteville. Absolutely. I know exactly the play you're talking about, and watching them on Saturday night, I agree. Just not the accuracy, not the velo, didn't really take shots down the field. And I just felt too that between he and his wide receivers specifically, there was a disconnect. It just didn't seem like they were on the same page, which goes back to what you said. Seems inexplicable considering that they were just coming off a bye week. So many things that you would think you could work out, even if Bryce is working on a pitch count in practice. There's still some things you can, talk through in the meeting rooms and go over and sort of sync up and get in a little better place from that perspective. But it felt like the one guy he had confidence in was Ja'Cory Brooks, and that showed up statistically because he targeted Ja'Cory 17 times. Otherwise, there just wasn't much cohesiveness between he and his wide receivers, the backs and the tight end, Cameron Latou, especially in the first half. That was about the extent of the passing game.
You get the feeling, and I could flip on a replay, I guess, and maybe even count how I would call it one pass against another, Travis, but so many of these pass plays all year long, really, but especially against LSU, end up scramble drill, broken plays where Young is floating around and looking for some. It's sandlot football, right? I get it. If you're Bryce Young, you stay in the pocket. You look at the first read. You look at the second read. You got to feel the rush. Maybe you bail after 2 reads. Maybe you bail after 3. But you kind of get the sense at times, especially on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, that Bryce Young feels better floating around and extending the play and playing that sandlot game where the receivers are having to break off of their routes and kind of get that sync and get that chemistry you're talking about with Young kind of on the fly. And it hasn't been easy to do at times for this Alabama offense this year, especially against LSU.
Tough way to live on offense, man, when you can't sort of script in some easy explosive plays. And they don't do that. And I understand to an extent you're trying to protect Bryce. So you're not going to have many design play calls where you're having him on the move all that much. But I do think they could help him in terms of just a little bit of moving him, and moving the launch point and maybe sending a back across the formation and underneath and sort of the slice play that we see with tight ends that Alabama's run in the past to guys like O.J. Howard and some of the other tight ends, just quick tosses off of action to the back, because what you're seeing right now is defenses know this too. They know the last case scenario is for Bryce to hang on to the football outside of the pocket and try to make plays with his legs other than as a passer. So, it's getting tougher to run the football as a result of this based on how Alabama wants to run it. And we had heard from Nick Saban early last week, need more diversity in the run game. It looked like the same run game to me in terms of what they like to dial up from a play perspective. And, they hit some plays. The rushing numbers for Jahmyr Gibbs were good, but similar to the Tennessee game, the overall output wasn't, what you would call impressive. But again, when you just look at scrimmage yards between Jahmyr and Jace with the explosive play there of 65 yards, and then Roydell Williams with a couple of short yardage touchdowns, they still got some decent production from the backs.
They did. I think the only difference I saw in the running game, diversity-wise, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, they turned to Roydell Williams for some couple first downs on short yardage. It looks
personnel,
like a
personnel decision. But where's an end around every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I got a defense that's just hauling ass to my back, and I'm not even talking about a long gated reverse, just to get fake here, give it the other way to an Isaiah Bond or Kobe Prentice or somebody, just to slow these people down a little bit, or a flea flicker off of action to Jahmyr Gibbs. If you're not able to get the ball down the field in the passing game, and maybe that goes back to Bryce's health, I don't know. But if it doesn't involve that, they struggle immensely. And I understand LSU played more zone, I guess, Saturday night. But there's some ways that schematically you got to be able to help not only your quarterback, but your offensive line and your running backs. Everything it seems like Alabama does right now on offense is hard. It's tough, and they pop a few plays here and there, but down in and down out, man, it's a grind.
I think you make a great point about the lack of play calls where Young is moving by design in the passing game, right? Waggle action, roll out, whatever, because what they're doing now, that's not the kind of quarterback motion you're talking about, because
No.
what you're talking about is a design play where you're designing an extended passing play and a little extra time for the quarterback into the play. And guess what? When you do that, yeah, the quarterback might not be in the pocket, but everybody out on a route knows where the ball is going to be coming from, right? Because Young will be standing where he's supposed to stand, not in the pocket, but releasing in an area that's part of the play design. What they're getting now is Young is releasing the. Nobody has any idea.
95% of their pass plays are pure pocket oriented throws, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. But how many of them end up with Bryce Young? Throwing the football from anywhere. Nobody knows where he's going to be when he throws it, including him.
You make it so much easier on run defenders, pass rushers, and Bryce, as you outlined here, and he's just so gifted in his ability to extend that he covers for a lot of that.
Yeah,
but it doesn't have to be this hard. It doesn't seem like it has to be, but this is what they've sort of settled on. And when you had absolute dudes on the outside like you had last year, okay, you could do this, but you got to help these guys get open too.
Yeah.
This group, you got to help these guys. And Bryce tries to do that, as you said, by extending plays in hoping the secondary breaks down like it did on Ja'Cory Brooks's touchdown catch Saturday night. But man, to try to depend on that down in and down out, it's a lot, isn't it?
The staff put this season on Bryce Young's back, and Saturday night was the wrong night for it.
Well, it was, and we say that, and he still handed the defense a lead. What, 2 or 3 times?
A couple times, yeah, in the second half.
And this was supposed to be an all-time defense. And Tennessee, he handed them the lead late, handed them the lead a couple of times, 2 or 3 times Saturday night, and the defense didn't get the job done. The offense can certainly be better. Bryce was not without fail Saturday night. The end zone interception was big from a perspective of the psyche of not only that LSU team, but that fan base, because they'd seen that shit before, right? Alabama comes in right out the gate and steps on their neck. And that's what that was going to feel like before that interception didn't happen. So, look, Bryce, you're right. He wasn't perfect, but, man, in the fourth quarter, he was the only hero Alabama had. And there were no heroes on defense.
No. Young is so averse to tucking it and running it across the line of scrimmage. It's like he's got a shot collar on,
Yeah.
And going across the line of scrimmage is going to zap him or something. And that first interception, first interception you're talking about, it was actually a good idea, I think, to JoJo Earl, because he had a step. All he had to do was lead Earl with the throw, and instead he flicked it behind Earl.
Yeah,
it's a 7-point difference.
Yeah, it was a 3/4 arm sort of action. It was had a defender coming at him. He tried to wrap it around him. Basically, what he did with Cameron Latou at Tennessee on the 1 touchdown pass, and this time it didn't work. But again, if there was one resilient football player for Alabama in the game Saturday night, it was Bryce freaking Young.
Yeah.
Because when it started to go downhill for the defense in the second half, it was over. There was no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. There was nobody on that side of the ball that could sort of stabilize that group, because offensively, there was piss poor body language in the third quarter when they were having some struggles. And I think Bryce gets a lot of credit, deservedly so, for kind of stabilizing that deal and putting it on his back and still putting his team in a position to win the game. And also Will Reichard, man, give that dude a lot of credit. The scar tissue he had to accumulate from that Tennessee game. Wasn't evident on Saturday night. He hits a big one late in regulation to get the game to overtime. So, I mean, there were some other heroes, but there weren't many other than Bryce Young.
No, yeah, I had Reichert on my show notes too, Travis. Which, of course, you and I don't have production meetings, so
we're having one right now.
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
We just let it rip here on Talkin Tide. It's a better show that way for all involved. But yeah, Reichert could have been a big hero. The way the game turned out, what Reichert did was kind of forgotten. But big kicks for him in Baton Rouge. There's no doubt about it. And you know, I think it reminded me a little bit, and we'll get to the defense here in a second. I guess we already have, but Young's performance reminded me a little bit of the Texas game in that there was all kinds of problems for the first 3 quarters, just out of sync football left and right, a lot of struggles, a lot of 3 and outs, some bad field position. Some terrible field position for Alabama, especially against LSU. Had 3 drives that were from their own 10, and another one, 2 from their own 10 and 1 from their own 11 early in the game. Didn't even make a first down on any of those 3 drives, and didn't try to run the ball on any of those 3 possessions either. So they just kept punting the ball to midfield over and over, and it caught up with them. Finally, when LSU scored their first touchdown, LSU's first touchdown drive was a 49-yard drive coming off of one of those punts that Burnip had to knock out of his own end zone. But then in the fourth quarter, just like at Texas, you started to see Young pull it together a little bit. You started to see a little more cohesion, and in overtime too. I mean, he did everything he could do in overtime. But it ultimately it was not enough. But from a grit and a guts perspective, I got nothing but a tip of the hat for what I saw from Bryce Young.
No, and he pretty much decided there down the stretch that he was going to ride. He still continued to spread the ball around a little bit. Latu and Jermaine Burton had a 15-yard catch, I think it was, on the drive to go down and get the field goal that was
third
big.
down, right? A third down for that Burton.
And JoJo Earl had a big one too there in the fourth quarter on a little corner route. But again, it felt like he was going to ride with Ja'Cory and Jameer for the most part. Those were going to be his 2 guys. They combined for 15 receptions in the game. So there was a mix, but there was also, I thought, a clear delineation between who he was going to dial up and who were going to be very much secondary options. So, I thought the offensive line was okay. You look at the stats, just 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss for LSU. But then you have to factor in a lot of the stuff that Bryce does to kind of help that group. And there's times where he hurts them too, because they don't, a frustration for an offensive lineman too is when you don't know where your quarterback's going to be a lot of times. But Bryce isn't one to ditch very early too, and he will work up in the pocket before he'll start to make some alternative sort of decisions there, and as far as his navigation goes. So no, it just, it's a situation where you're right. I thought it was reminiscent in some ways of the Texas game. I thought it was reminiscent in some ways of Texas A&M, where you had an opportunity on the last play of the game to make a play defensively, and this time it didn't happen. But the common denominator in all this, as we've talked about, is Bryce. And I thought Jameer was good once again. He had over 160 scrimmage yards, so you don't have a problem with that. He took a big shot early in the game. I think he's still dealing with something shoulder related, upper extremity related, because they had a tight shot of him on the sideline after that, and he looked like he was feeling it a little bit still.
Speaking of working up in the pocket, same could be said of Jaden Daniels. Looking at the Alabama defensive performance, got sacked 6 times, Travis, but seemed like it was always -2. -3, -1.
6 sacks, lost 15 yards.
Right.
So that's not 3 yards a sack. You're right.
Right. So that was certainly a factor, and you credit Daniels for that, right? Because a lot of these guys who think they're faster than everybody on the field at the quarterback position. They like to go out the back gate and end up losing 14 sometimes with these sacks. But that wasn't the case with Daniels, and of course he ended up hurting Alabama a couple times getting across the line of scrimmage, especially of course in overtime. Alabama's defense looked beat on that overtime run by Daniels. A couple missed tackles in there, a couple guys not where they're supposed to be, and it seemed like it took Alabama 10 minutes to score an overtime touchdown, and LSU scored one in 2 seconds.
Yeah, one play, Jaden Daniels, and it's a play that Alabama talked about throughout the week because it was a bread and butter play in that offense with Jaden Daniels, kind of an RPO run pass option. And he gets a couple of blocks out on the corner. Alabama loses leverage on the edge with Dallas Turner. And just like that, it's down to the 2-point play. And so, look, Alabama returned a ton of experience this year on that side of the ball, returned what we thought was a ton of playmaking ability, but really, other than one guy for the duration of the season, and even by comparison to a year ago, Will Anderson, while still having a really good year, this isn't Will Anderson 2021, and you knew opponents were going to have something to do with that this time around.
Right.
They knew who he was last year. This year, they knew they weren't going to let him beat them. That's, I think, the difference. But there's so many other guys that have played a lot of football and have made some plays that really throughout this season haven't made a play. And, you had a true freshman tight end against what is believed to be one of the better safeties in college football in Jordan Battle on a couple of plays late in that game and in overtime Saturday night. And Mason Taylor got the job done for LSU.
He certainly did. No turnovers created by the defense. Kind of the same old story there. Really
they don't even really get hands on the football, whether it's, as we talked about earlier in the season, hands in passing lanes up front, defensive backs getting hands on footballs other than maybe Kool-Aid McKinstry. Eli Ricks wasn't tested in the first half, but in the second half, LSU got after him. A couple of PI penalties, including one in the end zone. Hell of a catch by Malik Neighbors on an explosive play down the Alabama sideline. So you give more credit to LSU than sort of detract from Eli on that. But they worked Kool-Aid more, it felt like, Chase, in the first half. But then they got around to Eli in the second.
They did. Yeah. Everything as far as getting their hands on footballs, it's been a struggle. You don't see Alabama's defense this year taking rips at the ball for forced fumbles, I think, as aggressively as we've seen some Alabama defenses of the past as well. And same old story with penalties. And, of course, with penalties, we're not just talking defense. It's offense, too. But 9 for 92 special teams, 9 for 92, too many, again, on the road. Unfortunately, that was actually Alabama's best penalty effort on the road this season, Travis. 9.
Yeah, that seemed like a low number, but you're right. And again, kind of when the game was on the line, those pass interference penalties crop back up. And the only thing I can think at this point is that it goes back to a lack of poise. At the moment of truth in a big spot, you still got guys that are sort of panicky or not trusting their technique enough. And again, these are guys, for the most part, that have played a lot of football. These aren't like a year ago down the stretch when you had Kool-Aid and Kyrie out there. You kind of threw them in there, after you lost Jalen Armour Davis and Josh Jobe. And it's really not Kool-Aid. I would go as far as to say at this point, Kool-Aid is pretty clearly Alabama's top defensive back. Now, Brian Branch would be in that discussion, even though Brian's had some penalty issues. And that's such a tough position he plays in today's game, that star position, because you have to be physical. You have to be able to play, kind of in the box in some situations. And then you end up getting matched up against a guy like Kayshon Boutte when he lines up in the slot. So maybe the most unenviable spot on defense in football right now is that slot corner position.
That's the guy who needs an S on his chest as much as anybody on the defense in this
Yep.
day and age. Really, there's no doubt about it. All right, the Talkin Tide podcast. Moving on, we're going to thank a couple of sponsors on the show right now, really quickly. Going to start by telling you all about North River Dental Associates and that great service you get from Dr. Jack Smalley, the former Alabama linebacker, and his super staff of dental hygienists. North River Dental can handle porcelain veneers, cosmetic dentistry, pediatric dentistry, endodontics, laser dentistry, dentures, the always popular teeth whitening services. Great location right off of Watermelon Road at 1100 Fairfax Park. And they're going to get you in and out the door, typically in under an hour for a routine cleaning. Also, currently doing Botox and Juvederm treatments to tighten up those facial features. Give them a call. The phone number is 752-3506, or you can go online and make an appointment at northriverdentist.com. It is North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Holiday season production is ramping up there at Peterbrook Chocolatier. So if you're in charge of that family get together, maybe you handle ordering for that corporate party that you're looking to facilitate. Peterbrook Chocolatier can still help you at 205-752-0211. And of course, if you stop by the shop right there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North, still going to have all your traditional favorites, whether it's the chocolate popcorn, the hand-dipped caramel, chocolate-dipped apples, those daily dipped chocolate strawberries. They got it all waiting for you right now. It is Monday through Saturday, 10 to 8. Those are your hours at Peterbrook Chocolatier. So get by and check them out. Peterbrook Chocolatier, Tuscaloosa, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North.
Finally, going to tell you about our corporate sponsor. That would be DraftKings. The action in the NFL is going crazy. Big upsets left and right. Saw the New York Jets knock off the Buffalo Bills today. We saw those Jacksonville Jaguars, our Jaguars, Travis, break a losing streak and get it done against those Las Vegas Raiders. And you want to get in on that? Hey, the place to do it is certainly with the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Make every play feel exciting this season with the DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Some unbeatable offers right now. New customers can make any $5 bet and get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Check it out. In addition to the usual bets, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays as well. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code TPPN. That'll help us here at Talkin Tide. You'll get $200 in free bets if your team wins on just a $5 bet, only at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And again, that promo code is TPPN. Travis, we'll close it out talking SEC football. Got to start with that Georgia-Tennessee game. The Dogs, Travis, were never and have never been anything but the best team in this league from week one. And Alabama probably took a turn in some polling, I guess, at the top at the beginning of the season. Tennessee took a turn when they beat Alabama. But look, it's always been Georgia.
It has. And really, it comes down to complementary football, right? All three phases of the game, how they sort of match up. Georgia being very, very solidified in who they are as a program, how they go about their business on offense, how that complements the defensive side of the ball, how their special teams complement both the offense and the defense. You got to give Kirby Smart and his staff a ton of credit with all the change, right? Alabama was supposed to be Georgia's defense from a year ago, when in reality, it looks like Georgia's defense this year is Georgia's defense from a year ago, with all those guys moving on to the NFL. And that goes back to Kirby and his staff. It's been sort of seamless how they've gone through that. And, you know, Kirby knows he's got the better players right now, and pretty much 98% of the matchups that team finds itself in. And I thought that's what they did defensively. They said, look, we got a war daddy like Jalen Carter up front. We're going to come up and challenge your receivers on the outside. And if you can't get pretty early separation, a guy like Jalen Carter is going to get there. And, oh, by the way, I'm not going to sit back and let my safeties try to play in coverage against these guys like Jalen Hyatt. I'm going to bring them on occasion. So just a really good defensive plan, really good execution, and physicality really on both lines of scrimmage. Georgia was very impressive in terms of how they took care of business on the offensive and defensive lines.
Bullied Tennessee. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. That game was
No.
not as close as 27-13 would
Tennessee didn't wake
indicate.
up this morning feeling like it was a 14-point game. I trust you. Trust me
No,
on that. No.
absolutely. That Georgia defense, Travis, that everybody was questioning whether or not they could reload from all those NFL draft picks they had. They've given up 8 touchdowns in 9 games.
Yeah.
So they're okay. So.
Yeah, they're just fine. Yeah, they're all right. But they returned just enough defensively. Guys like Ringo at corner, Carter up front, some pieces in that front seven that had at least played a good bit were back. But it goes back to just the standard that we've often talked about in relation to Alabama. Now you're seeing that very much in play at Georgia. You got guys that are stepping forward on an annual basis that understand this is the level at which I must perform to have a role in this thing. And Kirby's got that thing rolling.
No doubt about it. That is going to do it for us here on this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Be sure to join us Wednesday night. We'll be previewing Alabama's upcoming road contest at Ole Miss. And we'll look forward to do that with you on Wednesday night. So until then, for Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News and Crimson Cover Television. We'll talk to you next time right here on Talkin Tide.